Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to make a boho inspired top. This cold shoulder design features the moss stitch for most of the body and lovely trinity section for some added texture, and to tie it all together, a chic mock neck. Speaking of, if you love your turtlenecks mocked, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of the most classic and modern crochet tutorials and patterns, including some of the best mock neck patterns you'll ever come across, dropping weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work. I used a total of 530 grams of yarn. That's 1,100 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 6mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you've ever won anything. I have won a few dance and figure skating competitions way back in the day. Details for the giveaway down below. We are using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and trinity stitch. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 6mm hook and start off by making an even number chain that starts 1 inch underneath our underarm down to we're about 4 inches away from where we want the bottom of this top to be, because we are going to have some details. So I'd like for mine to be roughly 11.5 inches or 29 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain of 42. So now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our first row, which is a moss stitch row. We're all going to start by blocking off that last chain and starting with a chain 1. That first chain is going to count as our turning chain, and then chain a second chain, so 2 in total, and that second chain is going to count as a chain. That's going to make a little bit more sense in a second. And once we have our extra 2 chains, we're now going to single crochet into the 4th chain from our hook. So here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, and then here's 4. Into that 4th chain, we're just going to bring our hook down into that chain and insert with a single crochet, and that forms our first chain space and our first single crochet. So we should all have 1, 2 stitches so far for this row. Let's do this again. Chain 1, we're going to skip that following chain, and into the one right after that, another single crochet. Now all together, we should have our first chain space, single crochet, another chain space, single crochet, for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. Let's just do one more. Chain 1, skip a stitch, and then into the following, insert with a single crochet, and we should all now have a total of 6 stitches so far for this row. Continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, and single crochet into the following until we all have 2 chains left. We've made our way all the way down, and we should all have 1, 2 chains left. Now what we're going to do from here is close off this row with an increase. So right after that last single crochet, we're all going to chain 1, skip that second to last chain, and then into the last, we're all going to do a single, half double, and double crochet. So skip the second to last, and into the last, insert with a single, into that same last chain with a half double, so yarn over, into that same last chain, pull through all 3, and then into that same last chain once more with a double crochet. So insert, pull through 2, and pull through 2. Now, just as a fun fact, we're doing this increase because if we do an increase of 3 single crochets, that could work as well, but if we do a bunch of rows, then it'll eventually start to curve backwards on us. Once we have this, we're going to get started on the following row, which is going to be another moss stitch row. So whenever we're getting started on a moss stitch row, we're always going to chain 2. That first chain, like getting started on a row 1, counts as our turning chain. That second chain is going to count as our chain and flip our work. Now from here, what we're going to do is skip that first stitch, and then into that following stitch, insert with a single crochet. So skip one, into the next, single crochet, and we should all have our first chain space and our first single crochet. So the first 2 stitches for this row. Now a really quick tip, the first chain space that we make could collapse on itself like this. So when you're working back and forth, it could look like we don't have an extra stitch there. But just make sure that we're not forgetting that extra stitch along the edge of the row, because if we do, it could result in some accidental decreasing and our work could be a little wonky. But from here, all we're going to do is chain 1, skip a stitch into the following, which now it should be our chain space, single crochet into that chain space. So for our moss stitch row, every single crochet is going to be worked into our previous row's chain space. So I just did my chain, skipping my following stitch, which is a single crochet, and then into the stitch right after that, which is our chain space, a single crochet, and just once more, chain 1, skip a stitch into that following stitch, which is our chain space, a single crochet. Continue this until we reach the end of the row. Everyone's last stitch should be a single crochet into the last chain space. Now everyone's row 2 is all finished. Now all we're going to do is continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. So let's just get started on the following row together. So since we're at the edge, getting started on our row 3 or any moss stitch row, we're always going to chain 2 and flip our work. We're all going to skip that first stitch from our previous row, which should be a single crochet, and then single crochet into that following stitch, which should be our chain space. So we're going to skip one, into that next, a single crochet, and we should all have our first chain space right there, and then our single crochet, so our first 2 stitches. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch into the following, which is our chain space with a single. Now continue doing this until we all have 2 stitches left so we can increase together once more. Alright, so we are back and we are nearly finished with our 1, 2, first 3 rows. Now we should all have 2 stitches left. That second to last stitch for every size should be a single crochet, and then that last stitch should be our chain space. Now like I said in one of our previous clips, that first chain space could collapse on us, making it look like we don't have an extra stitch, but it will be there, I promise. What we're going to do from here is the same increase that we did at the end of row 1. So chain 1, skip that following stitch, which is our single crochet, and then into the next, which is our chain space, a single, a half double, and a double crochet, and that is our increase. Now our following row, every even number row, is going to be a moss stitch row with no increases and no decreases. So just to get that started, we're all going to chain 2 and flip. We're all going to skip that first stitch, into the next, single crochet, chain 1, skip 1 stitch, which the next stitch should be a chain space, single crochet into there. Now we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have an underarm portion that can reach from mid-underarm over to mid-collarbone. And I'll meet you back right after an odd number row so we can get started on our shoulder right after that. Alrighty, so I am back with my underarm portion. I have a total of 13 rows. My width is roughly 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. And now we're going to get started on the shoulder. So from where we're at, since we all should have ended along the top, we're all going to make an even numbered chain that reaches the top of our shoulder, making sure that this first row, or where our tail end is, still remains at 1 inch underneath our underarm. So I went ahead and measured mine out. I made a total chain of 8, and that's roughly 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters. Now all we're going to do is our moss stitch all the way back down. So just as a refresher, once we have our chain, block off that last chain and do a chain 2. First chain is our turning chain. Second chain counts as a chain, single crochet into the 4th chain from our hook, and continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, and single crochet into the next, making our way all the way down. So now that we've made our way all the way down with our first shoulder row, all we're going to do from here is our moss stitch rows with absolutely no increases and no decreases until we have a shoulder portion that reaches till about 1 inch before the base of our neck, and we all must end along the bottom. So since we're all along the bottom right now, all we're going to do is chain 2, flip our work, skip that first stitch, single crochet into the next. I'll meet you guys back once the shoulder portion is all finished up so we can get started on the neckline from there. Alrighty, so I am back and my shoulder portion is now all finished. I have a total of 18 rows. My width is now 5 inches or 13 centimeters. And now from here we're going to get started on our neckline, and that's going to be pretty simple. We're all going to start by inserting a stitch marker into any even numbered stitch that we have from the top that's nearest to the base of our neck. So I've inserted my stitch marker into the 10th stitch from the top. That's roughly 2 inches or 4 centimeters. And now what we're going to do from here, since we all should have ended along the bottom, we're going to do our moss stitch, making our way all the way up until we reach our stitch marker. And just as a really quick tip, our stitch marker should be into a single crochet stitch from our previous row, because remember to count that chain space as our first stitch. Alright, so we've made our way all the way up until we reached our stitch marker stitch. Now all we're going to do from here is more of our moss stitch rows, working our way across our chest with absolutely no increases and no decreases until we make our way all the way across to our 1 inch past the base of our neck on the other side. Then I'll meet you guys back along the top or right after an odd number row so we can work straight into our shoulder from there. Alrighty, I am back and my neckline is all finished. I have a total of 41 rows now. My width is roughly 11 inches or 28 centimeters, and now we're going to do our shoulder. So this shoulder is going to be done pretty much the same way that we did the first shoulder. So what we're going to want to do is make a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on our neckline. So for those of you that have my numbers, I skipped a total of 10 stitches. So over here, I made a chain 10. Then we're going to chain 2, single crochet into that 4th chain from our hook, and then do our moss stitch all the way down. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and then do our moss stitch all the way back up. Now we're going to continue to do these shoulder rows with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of rows that we have for our first shoulder portion. And just as a really quick tip to make sure that everything is going smoothly for you guys, we should have the same amount of stitches for our first shoulder portion as this one right over here. But once we have that all finished up, I'll meet you guys back so that we can finish up our panel with our second underarm. We are back and our second shoulder portion is all finished up. Now we're going to finish up our front panel with our underarm. So first things first, we're all going to need to insert our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led all the way up to our shoulder. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain 8. So along this side, from the top, I inserted my stitch marker into the 8th stitch. And again, since it's an even number, it should be into a single crochet because we are going to be counting that first chain space. Now from here, since we all should be along the bottom, we are going to do our moss stitch until we are 4 stitches away from our stitch marker. Alright, so we've made our way all the way up with our first underarm row. Now we should all have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches left before our stitch marker stitch, and now we're going to do a decrease of 3 single crochets. So the last stitch that we all should have done should have been a single crochet. What we're going to do from here is chain 1, skip our following stitch, which should be our single crochet from our previous row, into that following stitch, which is a chain space, pull through into that following stitch, pull through, and then into that following stitch, which is the stitch right before our stitch marker, which is also a chain space, insert, pull through. We should have 4 loops on our hook, so yarn over, pull through all 4, and that is the end of this row. Now getting started on the following row, we are going to chain 2 and flip our work. Now our following row is not going to have any increases or decreases, since we only did an increase into every other row for the first underarm portion. So just to get started on this, skip that first stitch, which should be the top of our decrease, into that following stitch, which should be our chain space, single crochet, and make your way all the way down with our regular moss stitch. Now at the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and do our moss stitch all the way back up, leaving the last 4 stitches so we can decrease together just once more. We are back and we should have our first 2 underarm rows finished, and we're about to finish up our third. So we should have made our way all the way down and left the last 4 stitches. So here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, and then 4 is this collapsed stitch, which is our first chain space that we made for our previous row. Now the last stitch that we all should have done should have been a single crochet, so we're all going to chain 1. I've already done mine. Skip that following stitch, which is our first single crochet, into that following stitch, which is a chain space, pull through, into the stitch right after that, pull through, and then into that last stitch, which is our chain space. Might be a little hard to see, but just insert your hook and pull through. We should have a total of 4 loops on our hook, so yarn over, pull through all 4, and that's it. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as our first underarm portion. Once we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then make 1 more identical panel. So we are back. We have just finished up both of our panels, and now we're going to seam it together, and we're going to start by seaming the shoulders. So let's all start by placing our front panel on top of our back panel, and we're just going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back. Then insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do a single crochet seam, putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So finding our first side row, this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook. Finding the first side row within the back panel, this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop, insert, and single crochet around everything. Let's do that again. Into that following side row, this is mine. I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook, and then into that following side row, find that top loop, insert my hook, and single crochet. Continue on with our single crochet seam. When we don't have any more side rows left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. Now that we've just finished up our shoulder seams, now we're going to seam up our sides. So first things first, let's make sure that our work is flipped wrong side out, meaning the seam that we just did for the shoulders is still along the outside. Then we're all going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We are then going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now we're going to do another single crochet seam, putting 1 single crochet into every stitch in through both the front and the back panel. So finding that first stitch into the front panel, this is mine right here, insert, same first stitch within the back panel, insert, and single crochet, and just once more, next stitch into the front panel, and then next stitch into the back panel, and single. Continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed up, let's get started on the length of our body. So first things first, let's flip our work right side out now, meaning all of our seams that we just did are along the inside. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our piece. Then we're all going to chain 1 just to secure, and then we're going to start with a single crochet row. So let's all start by putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So this is my first side row right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. Again, this is my following side row. Find that top loop and single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue with 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way around. And we do want to make sure, and this is for every size, that we're adding 1 extra single crochet into that last side row because we all need to end on an odd number of stitches. When we've made our way all the way around and slip stitched into that chain space, I will meet you guys back. Alright, so our single crochet row is all finished up. Now we can get started on the following trinity stitch row. But we just want to double check and make sure that we have an odd number of single crochets. That's why we added that extra single crochet into that last side row. So right after we have slip stitched into that chain space, what we're going to do is chain 1. Now getting started on our first trinity stitch, what we're going to do is single crochet into that first available stitch. So insert with 1 single crochet. Now to do a trinity stitch, we're going to need to pull up 4 loops. So what we're going to do is inserting our hook into that same stitch that our single crochet is in. We're going to insert, pull up a loop for 2 loops. Then we're going to pull up a loop into the following 2 stitches as well. So into that following stitch, pull up a loop for 3 loops, and then into that following stitch, insert, pull through for 4 loops. Then all we're going to do is yarn over, pull through all 4, and chain 1 to fasten off that last trinity stitch. And we do want to make sure that we're using a medium to loose grip whenever we're doing our trinity stitch, otherwise the following row can be a little too tight to work into. So let's do this again. To do our second and the rest of our trinity stitches, what we're going to do is start by inserting our hook into the last stitch that our previous trinity stitch is worked into. So that stitch will be occupied. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert, pull through, into that following stitch, pull through, and then into the stitch right after that, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4, then chain 1. Let's do it again. Into that last stitch that our previous trinity stitch is worked into, insert, pull through. Into that following stitch, pull through, and into the stitch right after that, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 4, there we go, and chain 1. Let's just do 1 more. Last stitch that our previous trinity stitch is worked into, pull through. Next stitch, pull through, following stitch, pull through for 4 loops. Yarn over, pull through all 4, and chain 1, and we're all going to continue doing this until we all have 2 stitches left. Alright, so we have made our way all the way around, and we should all have 1, 2 stitches left. And now let's do our last trinity stitch together. It's going to start off the same way that we've started all of our other trinity stitches. So start by inserting our hook into the last stitch that our previous trinity stitch is worked into, pull through, into that next, which is the second to last, and then into that next, which is the last. Pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook again. Yarn over, pull through all 4, so that's per usual, but only for the last one. Instead of doing a chain 1 at the end, we're all going to single crochet into that same stitch that the last Trinity stitch is worked into, just to make it a little bit more sturdy. So into that last stitch, it will be occupied, insert, pull through 2, and now let's slip stitch it into that chain that we made when we got started on this row. And that is our first Trinity stitch. Now this is going to be the first portion of the bottom detail that we have for the length of our piece. Now the bottom detail is going to be Trinity stitch, moss stitches the same way that we did the body, and then more Trinity stitches. And you guys get to decide how long each of those sections are. Now I would like to do one more Trinity stitch for this first Trinity stitch detail. So after every Trinity stitch row, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. Now let's do the first Trinity stitch in our following row. So we're all going to start off our first Trinity stitch with a single crochet. So find that first stitch and making sure that we're not inserting our hook into that slip stitch that we made that connects the row. We're going to find that first stitch and insert with a single crochet. And then do our first Trinity stitch. So into that same stitch that our single crochet is in, pull through, following stitch, pull through, into the stitch right after that, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 4, chain 1. Now let's do our following Trinity stitch. So into the last stitch that our previous Trinity stitch was worked into, pull through, following stitch, pull through, following stitch, pull through for 4 loops, yarn over, pull through all 4, chain 1 to secure it all down. Continue this until we all have 2 stitches left, and then I'll meet you back to do the last Trinity stitch together again. So we've made our way all the way around. We should all have 2 stitches left. Now let's do our last Trinity stitch. So again, inserting your hook into that last stitch that our previous Trinity stitch is worked into, pull through, following, pull through and into the following, pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 4, and then instead of doing a chain 1 for the last one, we're going to single crochet into that last stitch. Now from here, slip stitch into that chain space, and all we're going to do is continue on with our Trinity stitch with no increases and no decreases until we have the first Trinity detail the length that we'd like. Now I'm actually all done right after these 2 rows, so now I'm going to do a single crochet row to prep for the moss stitch row. So I am going to chain 1 and flip my work. All I'm going to do is make my way all the way around, putting 1 single crochet into every stitch. We've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row and have slip stitched into that chain space. Now what we're going to do is make a chain that is an even number, the length that we'd like for our moss stitch detail to be. Now I'd like for mine to be roughly about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I went ahead and made a chain 6. Now we're going to do our moss stitch all the way back down. So once we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That first chain is our turning chain. That second chain counts as our chain, and then single crochet into the 4th chain from our hook. So here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, and then here's 4. Into that 4th chain, insert with 1 single crochet, forming our first chain space and single crochet or the first 2 stitches for this row. And from here, do our moss stitch all the way down. So chain 1, skip a chain, into that following, single crochet. Continue this, making our way all the way down our chain, and everyone's last stitch should be a single crochet. So now that we've made our way all the way down with our first moss stitch row, we're going to need to connect it into the base. So finding that next available stitch, we're going to insert our hook with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and pull through both of those loops on our hook. Now that slip stitch does not count as a stitch, we just needed to connect it. Then we need to work our way up to the following row, so slip stitch into that following stitch into the base as well. So insert, pull through everything, still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. Now let's get started on our following row or our even number row. So whenever we're along the base working our way out, we're always going to start with a chain 1, skip that first stitch, which should be a single crochet from our previous row, and then single crochet into that following stitch. So insert, pull through 2, and again we should have our chain space and single crochet, then continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the following to reach the end of the row. We are now at the end of our row 2, so do our moss stitch back. chain 2, flip our work, skip the first stitch into the following with a single crochet. I'll meet you back at the base. Our first 1, 2, 3 rows are nearly finished. We just need to connect it into the base now. So all we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the base, insert into there with a slip stitch. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. Still does not count as a stitch. Flip our work, and since we're along the base, we're going to get started on the following row, always with a chain 1, skip that first stitch, and single crochet into the next. And that's basically it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into the base. When we don't, I will meet you back so we can seam everything together. Alright, so we have made our way all the way around with our moss stitch rows. Now we're ready to seam it together. Now this is going to be a single crochet seam, so the same seam that we did for the sides and the shoulders. So let's flip our work wrong side out. Now just to do the first one, since we already know how to do this, all we're going to do is find that first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. And we're going to keep doing this until we don't have any more stitches left, and then I'll meet you back so we can work on the rest of the length of our top. Now our seam is all finished up. We're going to flip our work right side out again, meaning all of our seams are along the inside, and now we're going to do more trinity stitches, but we're going to have to do a single crochet first to prep for it. So from where we're at, we're just going to chain 1 and put 1 single crochet into every side row. When we make our way all the way around, slip stitch into that chain space. Alright, so our single crochet row is finished. Now from here, all we're going to do is the same trinity stitches that we just did together until we get the length of the top that we want. So just as a refresher, chain 1, flip our work to our trinity stitch all the way down. At the end of the row, slip stitch into that chain space, chain 1, make sure that we're flipping our work, and then trinity stitch all the way back. Now if you need timestamps for any of those trinity stitches, they will be linked in the description, but I'll meet you guys back once we have the total length of the piece that we want. I am back and the entirety of my piece is all finished. Now counting from my third section, so starting with our single crochet and then all of our trinity stitches that we just did together, I have a total of 10 rows. Now the total length that I have for my piece is 22.5 inches or 57 centimeters, and I did do a chain up of 1 cut after my last row. And now we're going to get started on our sleeve. So let's all flip our work right side out, and then we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that's nearest to our side seam. So now that our hook is into that side row, the next thing we're going to do is a single crochet row along our armhole. So let's all start by inserting our yarn onto our hook. We're all going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row, and then 1 single crochet into every stitch, and then repeat, making our way all the way down. So let's just do the first few. Now this is my first side row right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. This is my following side row. Insert your hook into there with another single crochet. That's basically it. We're going to continue on with our single crochet row, making our way all the way around. Well, we don't have any more side rows left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space, and then I will meet you back. So we are back and we have just finished up our single crochet row along our armhole. Now what we're going to do from here is insert our stitch marker into any even numbered stitch where we want the curve of our cold shoulder to start. Now this is going to be completely up to you. If you would like a larger cold shoulder cutout, insert your stitch marker lower, or if you want it to be a little bit smaller, insert your stitch marker higher. But for me, counting from my tail end, I inserted my stitch marker into the 14th stitch from the bottom, and that is within the front and within the back panel because we need it to be even. Once when our stitch markers are into place, we can get started on the first half of our sleeve. So from here, we're going to do another moss stitch row. So let's all start by making an even numbered chain, the length that we like for our sleeve to be, keeping in mind that we will have that same detail that we had along the bottom of our piece as well. So I needed a total of 12.5 inches or 32 centimeters. So I went ahead and made a chain of 52. Now we have our chain. We already know how to do our moss stitch, so let's just do the first one together. Block off that last chain and do a chain 2. To do the first one, we're going to single crochet into the 4th chain from our hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Into that 4th chain, insert with a single crochet. Then from here, chain 1, skip a chain, single crochet. Continue on with our moss stitch until we all have 2 chains left. So we made our way all the way down with our row 1, leaving our last 2 chains, and now we're going to increase into that last chain. So everyone's last stitch should have been a single crochet. So all we're going to do is chain 1, skip the second to last chain, and then into the last, we're going to do the same increase that we did for the body. So a single, a half double, and then also a double crochet, and now we need to connect it into the base. So all we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch, and that slip stitch does not count as a stitch, we just wanted to connect it, and now our row 1 is complete. Now getting started on our following row, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and then make our way down with our moss stitch, and just like how we did for the bottom of our body, whenever we're along the base working our way out with a moss stitch, we're always going to start with a chain 1, skip that first stitch into the next with a single crochet, chain 1, skip that following stitch and into the next stitch, which should be our chain space, a single crochet, and that's it. We're going to now continue to repeat these 2 previous rows. So at the end of every odd number row, it's going to end with our increase, and we are going to connect it into the base the same way that we just did, and the same way that we did for the moss stitch portion for the bottom of our body. Every even number row is not going to have any increases or decreases, and we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows, making our way all the way up until we reach our stitch marker. And just to let you guys know, our last row will be worked into that stitch marker stitch, so everyone's last row is going to be an even number row. I'll meet you guys back when we have the first portion of the sleeve all finished up. We are back, and we have just made our way all the way up to our stitch marker stitch with our increase rows. Now what we're going to do from here is the first half of our cold shoulder. So since we all should have ended along the outer edge, we're going to do our moss stitch. So same way that we've been doing them, making our way all the way back up, leaving the last 4 stitches, and then I'll meet you back so we can do a decrease. So we are back. We have made our way all the way down with our first cold shoulder row. And just to show you guys, we should all have 1 single crochet, 2 chain space, 3 single crochet, 4, which is our last chain space, 4 stitches left. Now what we're going to do from here is our decrease, and it's the same decrease that we did for the body. So everyone's last stitch should have been a single crochet. We're all going to chain 1, skip that following stitch, which should be a single crochet, and into that following stitch, which is a chain space, insert, pull through, into that following stitch, which is a single crochet, pull through, and then into that following stitch, which it may be a little hard to see because it's probably collapsed, a chain space, insert, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Then yarn over and pull through all 4. Now from here, our following row is going to be a regular moss stitch row. So chain 2 and flip. And all we're going to do is skip that first stitch, which should be the top of that decrease, into our following stitch, which is our chain space, insert with a single, chain 1, skip a stitch, and single. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until this cold shoulder portion can now reach over to the middle of our outer arm. And I'll meet you guys back right after an odd number row so we can finish up the second half of our piece. I am now back with the first half of my cold shoulder detail, and now we're going to do basically the rest. So we all should have ended along the inside right after an odd number row. I have a total of 21 rows, and now we're going to do our 1 middle row, which is just going to be a moss stitch row with absolutely no increases and no decreases. So from here, chain 2, flip our work, and make our way all the way down with our moss stitch row. That is going to be our middle row. Now for the following row, we're going to mirror everything that we did here, but on the other side. So at the end of our middle row, chain 2, flip our work. Do our moss stitch all the way back up until we have 2 stitches left, because now we're going to be doing an increase of 3, because on this side we did a decrease of 3. So I am back. I have finished up my middle row, which is my row with my stitch marker in it. That's just there so we can keep an eye on it a little bit easier. And then I've also made my way all the way back up with our following row. We have left the last 2 stitches, and now we're going to do an increase of 3, pretty much the same way that we did our increases for the underarm portion. So we should all have 1, which is our single crochet, and then 2, which is that chain space. It's a little difficult to see. Now all we're going to do from here, since everyone's last stitch should have been a single crochet, is chain 1, and then into that last stitch, which is our chain space, a single, half double, and double. And that is our increase. Now from here, we're going to be doing our following moss stitch row without any increases or decreases. So we're really increasing into every other row. So chain 2, flip our work, and make our way all the way back down with our moss stitch row. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows for the same amount of rows that we have for the first portion of our cold shoulder rows not including our middle row. When we have that finished up, I will meet you guys back, and just as a really quick tip, we should all meet back right after an odd number row. I am back with the second half of the cold shoulder portion of our sleeve. Now that we have the same amount of rows as the decrease portion, we're now ready to slip stitch it into the stitch marker stitch that we have on the other side of our armhole. So I'm just going to flip my work over. So I flipped my work over, and now we're looking at the other stitch marker stitch that we have on the other side of our armhole. Now all we're going to do is slip stitch into that stitch marker stitch, yarn over, pull through everything. This slip stitch does not count as a stitch, so that's just to connect it. And from here, we're going to flip our work and then do our following row. So since we're along the base, working our way down towards the end, we're all going to chain one and flip. And now from here, skip our first stitch into the following with a single crochet. So this is just a regular moss stitch row, making our way all the way down. At the end of the row, chain two, flip our work, do our moss stitch all the way back up, leaving the last 4 stitches, and then we'll decrease together. We have just finished up our first underarm row that's connected to our stitch marker stitch and worked our way out. At the end of that row, we chain 2, flip our work, and then made our way all the way back in with our following moss stitch row, leaving the last 4 stitches. These are my last 4, which is a single, a chain space, a single, and then that last chain space, which might be a little collapsed, but that's a total of 4 stitches right there. Now all we're going to do is a decrease of 3 single crochets. So chain 1, skip that following stitch, which is a single crochet, and then into that following, which is a chain space, pull through that single crochet, pull through, and then that last chain space that we can't really see, pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 4, and now we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we did for the other side of our sleeve. So just as a refresher, find that next available stitch into the base, slip stitch it into there. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch. And then just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. Still does not count as a stitch. Chain 1, flip our work, and then do our moss stitch row all the way down. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And then I'll meet you back to seam everything together. And just as a really quick tip, everyone's last row should be an odd number row. Alright, so we are back. We have just made our way all the way down with the decrease end of our sleeve. We don't have any more stitches into the base left to work into, so now we're going to seam it all together and finish off our sleeve with our detail. So all we're going to do is flip our work wrong side out so that all of our seams can be along the inside. Now just to do the first seam, since we already know how to do this, find that first stitch into the front panel, insert, find that first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. And continue doing this, making our way all the way down. And since we will all be along the edge, I'll meet you back so we can work straight into our detail from there. Alright, so now that our sleeve is all seamed up, we can get started on our detail. Now our detail is actually going to be done exactly the same way as the detail that we did along the bottom of our piece, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. Now if you don't want the same amount of rows for each section, for our detail that we had for the body, that's completely fine. Feel free to switch it up. But the general idea is right after this, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row. For this first single crochet, we will not be needing to add 1 extra single crochet into the last stitch like how we did for the body, because we should all already have an odd number of stitches. From here, we're going to do our trinity stitch rows, then our moss stitch rows, and then more trinity stitch rows to close off our sleeve. And we can make this as long or short as we like, or you can omit it, do whatever you want really. Now, I actually just went in with the same amount of rows that I had for my body portion, but once we have it all finished up, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then repeat everything we just did here on the other side, and then I will meet you guys back. Alright, so I am back. I have just finished up both of my sleeves. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut on both sides, and now we're ready to get started on our collar. So let's make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, and let's look at our neckline. We are going to now get started on our collar, and we're going to start by inserting our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along our neckline. Insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row, 1 single crochet into every stitch, and we're going to make our way all the way around our neckline. When we do, slip stitch into that chain space, and then I'll meet you back. We have made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. We have slip stitched into that chain space, and now from here we're all going to make a chain the height that we'd like for our mock neck to be. Now I'd like for mine to be roughly 5 inches or 13 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 20. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then from here we're going to slip stitch into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook. So insert, pull through everything on our hook. Let's do this again. Into that next chain, insert, yarn over, pull through everything. Continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, and remember not to tug too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row can be a little too tight to work into. We've just made our way all the way down with our slip stitch row, and now we're going to connect it into the base. Now connecting it into the base is going to be done exactly the same way as our sleeve. So to start by finding that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch does not count as a stitch, we just needed to connect it. And then we're going to work our way up to the following row. So slip stitch into that following stitch into the base and flip our work. And all we're going to do from here is put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So just finding the last stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert in through that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything. Again, into that next stitch's back loop, yarn over and pull through everything, and that's it. We are going to continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, we are all going to chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and then connect it into the base the same way that we just did, which is the same way that we were connecting our sleeves. That's basically it. Now this portion isn't going to have any increases or decreases. So just continue to repeat these 2 rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and then I'll meet you back so we can seam our collar together. So we've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now the last thing we're going to do is seam it together. Now this seam is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, so let's all make sure that our work is flipped right side out, and then we're going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're all going to yarn over, pull through everything, and now we're going to start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel and insert only into that front loop. Next, find that next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. Let's do that again. Into the next stitch into the front panel, insert into the front loop, next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop, yarn over and pull through all 3, and that's it. We are going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So now that our collar is all seamed up, the last thing we're going to have to do is single crochet across the top of our cold shoulder detail. So just start by inserting your hook into that same stitch that our cold shoulder detail is worked into, and then just put 1 single crochet into every side row, and then slip stitch into that same stitch that our cold shoulder detail is coming out of. Repeat this on the other side, and I'll meet you back when we're all finished. And now that we have finished up our single crochets, we are all done. Last thing we have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoy the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!